Hey there. I want to talk about a quote today that has really stood out to me. It's by Gabor Mate, and he says something to the effect of, if we don't allow our anger, we will always be working against it. If you don't allow your anger, you will always be working against it. And so maybe just think about that for a moment. Like, what does that mean? And I think this applies to all our emotions. But just in terms of anger, and I think back to my own life, being a chronic anger stuffer and very committed to being a good girl and people pleaser, I was really skilled at repressing my anger. But that meant that there was certain parts of me that were then having to work against my anger and actively work against my anger. And that takes time and energy. And that working against it does not come from nowhere. Like there's an impact that that has on us. And so I just was thinking about when I was in a relationship that was highly dysfunctional and toxic. And there was so much anger that was starting to rise in me, but I don't think I even knew that it was anger. Um, because I had been a people pleaser and stuffer my whole life, I didn't even know that these signs and symptoms were actually anger was starting to boil up. And just to think about that time in my life and what I was like and what was going on in my body. And I was, I remember starting to feel depressed. I remember that I started to have acid reflux, chronic tightness in my shoulder and jaw. I started to kind of be like people would say, like, you don't feel like you're light anymore. You feel like you're more kind of your light has dimmed. I started to have panic attacks. I remember, yeah, just feeling out of alignment with myself and out of sorts in a big way. And that was definitely a period of of time in my life, a period of my life where I was actively working against my own anger. Anger wanted to step forward and accurately, appropriately hold a boundary and say, no more. It is not okay to talk to me this way. It is not okay to treat me this way. No more. And I was stuffing my anger because I wanted to maintain the connection with him at all costs. And that had a huge cost on me. And so I'm just again thinking about that phrase again, when we don't allow an emotion, then we are working against that emotion. And I just invite you to think about your own life and just the ways in which, whether it's anger or grief or fear, which emotion do you have the greatest aversion to? And how might you be working against that emotion? What parts of you might have to be working really hard and maybe be pretty exhausted because they are actively working to manage and stuff that emotion? And how that's starting to impact your life. And I think that's really a huge step in just starting to kind of like see see clearly what we've been up to and then start to slowly invite ourselves to feel that emotion. And for me, anger was the most scary emotion of all the emotions that I could possibly feel. And that's the same for a lot of anger stuffers out there. For anger stuffers, their own fight response is the greatest threat. It's bigger than the threat in front of them, because they maybe grew up in a family situation where if they dared exert or open to their fight response, they could have maybe gotten hurt or abandoned. So for me, anger was the scariest feeling of all. And I was doing everything in my power unconsciously to stuff that emotion. So think about any emotion in your life that you might be doing this with, the impact that this might be having on you, and see if you can just very gently with yourself or the guidance of a therapist or somatic experiencing practitioner, just start to say, I feel angry right now. And it's okay. And you just, even if you're not feeling the emotion, maybe just putting a hand on your heart and naming it can be a really potent first step. So that's my invitation for you. Thank you so much.